everybody. Welcome back to Path to Play. It is Rory here.
And Valentina.
We are coming back to you guys with an episode about dealing with an injury. But before we get into that, we're going to start off with our question of the week, and it is going to be the opposite of last week. This time, Valentina, what was the worst trip you went on for a soccer game?
So let me preface that no trip was awful, obviously. However, traveling back and forth from Seattle to Texas for any game was always pretty brutal because it was a long flight and it was typically after games. So, also, we had Texas teams in our conference, so we had to go quite often. But I do remember one specific trip. It was our sophomore year, the COVID season. So it was definitely in the middle of springtime. We were playing a couple of Texas teams, I think. And I remember we had to fly back very quickly from Texas after our game ended that day. And we didn't have time to shower, which normally we do. And I remember I was sitting next to one of my teammates on this flight for 5 hours, all sweaty. We probably smelled so bad. There's 20 girls in one same area of the plane, and we couldn't fall asleep because it was too hot in the plane. So add that to the already existing sweat. I don't think we had eaten properly, so we were just waiting to go home. Couldn't even focus on homework. And I just remember, I think there's a picture we took of ourselves somewhere in my camera roll where we were just so sweaty and tired and flustered from that whole trip, and it couldn't have felt longer. We couldn't wait to get off of that plane to take a shower. And I just remember that trip very vividly because I was pretty miserable on that flight back.
Jeez, I can't believe they didn't let you guys shower. That's terrible.
Yeah, I think the timing of the flight was off for sure, but normally we were able to shower. Sometimes we even left the following day, but for some reason that was a really rushed trip. Oh, also, because it was COVID, we were wearing the masks.
Oh,
so
right.
that was on top of all of the other things that I just described.
I think a lot of people probably won't understand how much longer the flight feels from Texas to Seattle, just because it doesn't feel like you're going that far, but hours wise, it always takes so long. So I could imagine that being extra demoralizing after a game.
Yeah, it was long, and I bet the deplaning process was probably slow, I'm sure.
Oh, of
I don't
course.
remember that.
Well, thank you for the story. Moving on, we will be digging into how to deal with an injury and story from Valentina on how she dealt with an injury. So, during this COVID season that you were actually just talking about, you dealt with a pretty big knee injury. Can you walk us through that and how it happened and how you felt in the moment?
Yeah, so I guess I'll take us back to when it happened. I honestly think it was maybe a couple weeks, maybe a month after this trip that I just mentioned. We were at we were we were in Utah, and we were playing the second leg of our weekend games because we had to play the same team twice. Just weird COVID season. And I was defending this girl who was probably 3 times my size. And it was, I think, the last few minutes of the game. And when I was stepping to a ball, she kind of wrapped her leg all around the outside of my right leg as I was planting my right leg down to get the ball. And between the motion of me planting, her leg wrapping around mine, and obviously given the size of the girl who was tackling me, there was just a lot of weight that was going onto my planting leg. And next thing I know, I was on the ground. I was in pain. I was crying a lot, but I kind of had my eyes closed, so I wasn't really sure what was happening. And there are a lot of people around me. I could hear my friend Madison behind me. This wasn't funny in the moment, but I could hear her saying that I dislocated my knee, consequently making everyone turn into panic mode at that point. And I obviously had no idea what was happening. And our athletic trainer came on and did all the assessment, and you're so in shock and uncontrollably sobbing that nothing really truly comes out of your mouth to describe what you're feeling or what's happening. So I don't think I was very helpful in describing what I was feeling in this knee assessment. Anyways, got carried off the field, taken to the back of the tent where the injury person of the opposing team was, and I was being told a number of diagnoses, including that I had torn my LCL, which is the lateral collateral ligament, basically the outside of your knee. But no one can really tell you anything for sure until you get all of the MRI scans, the x rays. So, anyways, long story short, this trip obviously ended with me on crutches, getting on and off the plane via wheelchair, and having to call my parents because my parents aren't there. And I don't remember the rest. I just remember having to go to the training room after a long trip. And thankfully, our athletic trainer was there for me the whole time, then showing up early the next morning to get iced and looked at and talk a little bit more, etc. So that was kind of the immediate series of events.
Yeah, I remember watching that, and you could just tell it was a serious injury just kind of based on your reaction and then everyone else's reaction, probably because of
Mm-hmm.
Dr. Madison. In the moment when you were kind of crying and stuff, do you think it was because of the pain or just more of like a shock kind of feeling?
I think I was much more in shock because I don't remember the pain that well. I obviously remember being in pain, but I just remember I was, shutting my eyes really hard
Mm-hmm.
and
Yeah.
just wasn't really even registering what was happening. So I'd imagine it was more shock. Like, I didn't faint, and I don't think I've ever fainted properly, but I'm sure I was close to it at that point. It's hard to remember those details specifically. I just remember going in my own head and thinking, no, something bad just
Yeah.
happened.
Okay, so this happens, you get checked out, kind of you get a couple potential diagnoses by the doctor there and the trainer, fly back. Once you get back to Seattle, how long did you have to wait until you got X-ray, MRI? Kind of how did that process go?
Thankfully, that was very immediate. We got back probably on a Sunday night, and so this was Monday morning when I was back in the training room getting everything sorted out and looked at, and you go through this whole process of getting ice so that the swelling goes down and you get your wrap. And luckily we had a really good athletic trainer that could tell you, the very likely outcomes of your injury and what it could potentially be. So we started doing already some preventative exercises and, like I said, just general icing. But thankfully, this is one of the things I'm very grateful for, actually, because we had access to a doctor and we had surgical services nearby. Honestly, just great resources overall. I was able to get an x-ray and an MRI probably within the 3-day time frame. So that was honestly ideal. I can't imagine having that sort of injury now. I'm sure it would take a lot longer to go through that same process.
Yeah, definitely. How were those 3 days when you're kind of getting told it could be this, it could be that, and there's that uncertainty there?
I think I was just kind of grieving, and I think I already at that point accepted that whatever it was, whether it was an ACL tear or not, I was probably going to be out for a while because
Mm-hmm.
in the airport on the way back from Utah, I was definitely in denial. I refused the crutches and I was telling everyone, it's fine, I can walk, I can just walk it off kind of thing. But once I got home and I couldn't really do much and I was definitely using the crutches then, I think I kind of had the feeling that I was probably going to be out for a while. So I was sad and obviously hopeful, but for the most part, I was trying to mentally prepare myself for whatever came next.
So what came next when you got told that you tore your ACL, you were gonna have to get surgery? I guess how long did it take to set in that feeling of okay, I'm really gonna be out, and what were your immediate thoughts?
Luckily, I was alone when I got that call from my doctor, so I had a moment to myself to just cry it out. And then I was, again, very lucky that my team was trying to be as supportive as possible. There's really nothing you can say to make it better in that moment. Like, you're just gonna be a big crying mess for a few days. But I think I was more shocked still. I don't know. It was just prolonged shock for a couple weeks, I think, because as a soccer player, you understand that you are much more likely to suffer that kind of injury, especially as a woman playing soccer. I think it's a very common injury, but you never suspect that it'll happen to you. You
Right.
see it happen a lot, but you don't think, oh, or I guess I always thought, that's never going to happen to me. I would never have to go through such a horrifying and traumatic injury like that because I was always tough on the field. I guess I considered myself like I could put up a fight against girls who were bigger than me and I could compete. But the reality is that that doesn't shield you from those kinds of
Right.
injuries. So I think for the most part, I was in shock because I just didn't think that it would happen to me ever.
I could definitely see that, and I definitely share that feeling of you always know it's possible, but you're always like, it's not possible for me, kind of. You
Yeah.
think, yeah, I totally get what you're saying there. So, once that shock feeling kind of wore off, how did you approach dealing with the injury and giving, I don't know, a sense of purpose towards feeling better and improving?
Yeah, I think I had two big realizations once I got over that hump of I'm crying, I'm sad. I'm getting a lot of thoughtful support from teammates, from my family, from friends. Like, I think that helped obviously mend the wound a little bit. But then I had two realizations. I think one of them was that it is definitely a lot easier to take things for granted than I thought, and that nothing is for certain. Like, immediately from 1 second to the next, I was in a completely different position overall. And the second thing that I realized was that I had to find other things outside of soccer that fulfilled me and made me feel like I had something to look forward to, and like you said, most importantly, a sense of purpose. I think those were the two big lessons learned for me.
What were some of those things that you picked up in that time?
I think once I was able to start walking again and once I got back in my groove and wasn't in pain, the minute that I got the okay to go walk further than a mile, not
Mm-hmm.
even, maybe like 15 minutes, I started doing a lot of dog walking. I
Mm-hmm.
actually watched your dog Rex a lot. He was a great companion during that time. And I think that was probably the time period where I appreciated Seattle as a city a lot because my team was still traveling. I mean, the world kind of goes on without you. So, not in a morbid way or anything, but
Right.
genuinely, they had to keep playing. So, I stayed back because you don't travel when you're injured. And I would just be on my own schedule. I would go out and try new places. I would obviously see friends and be around teammates when they would come back, but the season is busy, so I again would go out and see parks that I hadn't been to. I would go try and see different areas of the city that I wouldn't normally have time to do. I joined a business club at school, which I think I don't think I would have had time to do that had I still been in season. And that club honestly was really good for me in the long run as well. And luckily school was remote at that time, so I also again, I was lucky enough to have this extra time to do all of this because I think in a normal setting perhaps school would have kept me a lot busier. Also, I think having physical therapy gave me a huge sense of purpose too. Like I felt like that was a great way for me to just get stronger, even though it really doesn't feel like you're getting stronger.
Right.
It definitely is a good way to keep your focus. Not for the immediate result of getting back onto the field, but I tried to shift my perspective of looking at it in the long term for my long-term health.
That's super interesting. I think when I got hurt, I dealt with a very similar scenario where it's like, okay, I can't do what I've been doing, so what can I do? I personally picked up cooking and baking heavily, which is still kind of a hobby of mine, but I do think that's something that was really helpful for me as well in the time away from the sport.
Yeah, and I think also what you just said is important. Like your whole purpose was soccer and your sport. And so I think that goes back to what I said earlier about having to realize that I needed to find a different sense of purpose. That's that's ultimately the reason why, because you from one moment to the next got stripped of your sole purpose. Granted, I had student still going for me, but the student athlete title
Right.
is effectively not there anymore. And while you're still a part of the team, it's just really not the same.
It seems like you made a very good recovery and had a lot of learning experiences from this injury. How important would you say your support system was during this, and who were key pieces of your support system?
My support system was huge. I've already mentioned a few. My athletic trainer, I think, honestly, just set me up for success. And my team, for sure. I think, especially my closest teammates, they got me through tough times and, having to sit on the machine that bends your leg all the time. My roommate, Mo, she would sit with me for those 3 hours and we would talk, we would do homework, we would watch movies. My family, obviously. I mean, my mom was there when I had surgery. I will say one thing that was tough was being so far away from my family. Like, having my parents around would have helped a ton. With such a physically limiting injury, especially within that first month, especially with how rainy and hilly Seattle is and not having a car, I mean, moving around was a challenge with crutches and with a huge brace. And even without the crutches and just the brace was tough, but my family was always there. I mean, I would go home a lot and they would help me. They were a huge role in the mental aspect, more specifically. I think just encouraging me to, most importantly, prioritize my long-term health, not rushing. I think that was a huge piece that a lot of, honestly, probably everyone in my circle told me to do. Just take your time, don't rush things. If you have to take the full year to recover, absolutely take it or more. And I think that allowed me to be at peace with the whole 12 months that I was recovering because I knew that it was for the better. And also, I would honestly say that school, once we got to go back in person and I was able to interact with classmates, professors, that definitely also gave me a good sense of purpose of I'm working towards something.
It sounds like you made a lot of strides during this time, like off the field, obviously. Once you kind of returned back to the field and once you're looking back at it, how do you think your relationship with the game changed during this time?
That's a great question, actually, because I never thought about that. But I think I honestly was more appreciative. Like I said, I had that realization, the first one of you really can't take things for granted. Like you think all the things you have are for certain, and then suddenly it's like gone. And I think when it's such a big piece of your life that gets taken in that way, in such a harsh way, it really changes your outlook on what it means to be doing that. So I think I just became more grateful in all ways possible. I think we spoke to this in one of our last episodes. I relaxed a little bit at that time. Maybe later on I didn't, but at that time I think I was just grateful to be where I was. I was trying to include myself with the team as much as I could. I obviously acknowledged that I was in a very different place than most of my teammates, but I was trying to involve myself and stay connected with everybody. I went back for that summer to continue doing rehab, which is a time that I would have normally been at home. I worked our summer camps again to feel like I had a sense of purpose, like I had a role on the team. Things like that that I don't know if I would have had that same level of effort had I not gotten this injury. But again, I think it was one of those change in perspectives. But ultimately, I think a big thing was I realized that there were a lot of bigger problems out there. So I think that also helped a lot too. Maybe that's the third realization.
That could be a good third one. Overall, how do you think the injury affected your experience and your outlook going forward, whether that be positive or negative?
I think it affected everything. Like, I truly don't think I would be the same without it. I can never answer the question of, oh, would you do it again? Because honestly, that's kind of a stretch. I don't know if I would go through that whole thing again. But as they say, everything happens for a reason. And I think ultimately, again, lots of walking. Once I could walk, lots of journaling, dog time, and time for myself. I think that was a big one too. All of that led me to understand also that I'm probably definitely not the first or the last person to have a knee injury, specifically an ACL injury. And there are a lot of worse things out there in the world, and there's going to be a lot of harder things in life. And I just looked at it as another one of those things that would hopefully prepare me for other challenges and hardships. And I think also it gave me the determination to come back with a better mindset, with being stronger, being more physical, and coming back to play because I was coming back for my senior year effectively.
Right.
Because I got injured in the spring. I missed my junior year. And I think that I just came back thinking I'm going to really make the active effort to just make the most out of this last year, enjoy my time, and be grateful. So I think gratitude and opening my perspective, looking at the bigger picture, was probably a huge lesson learned there. And that I honestly, I'm here, I'm running, I'm doing yoga, I'm training, I'm lifting, like it all honestly was okay,
That's awesome and a great way to take such an impactful experience and try and find the most positive you can out of it.
Yeah, you got to take something out of it, right?
Thank you for sharing your story. That was super awesome, and being able to watch it in person while it happened, I can confirm she wasn't lying about any of that. She did all of that. It was awesome.
Yeah, also, Rory was part of the support system. I forgot to mention Rory. He was a big piece.
Yeah, missed out on a big support piece there. All right. Thank you guys so much. Let us know if you have any other questions. We're going to dig into the process of coming back from these injuries later on, but we wanted to give you guys an in-depth story description of kind of how it is when you first get hurt and how you deal with that mental hurdle.
Yes, and also look out for a very special episode this next coming week.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. See you soon.